Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, your King, King Clifford Jefferson, our student of Godfrey, the fifth count of Van Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, who we know as King Edgar the Peaceful. I'm here to give you a marvelous lesson on the sovereign monopoly in regards to monetary sovereignty in lieu of the ability to be able to create a state currency. Once again, this video is about monetary sovereignty in lieu of the monopolies that were created to deal with the creation of currency under the license of the sovereign. So they are truly, in the best sense of the word, sovereign monopolies. Sovereign monopolies. We know that the monopolies that were created here under the central banking system here in North America was, or now is based in what we call the Federal Reserve System. Prior to that, it was under what we call colonial government, through what they call their central banking system, was known as the Bank of America, the First Bank of the United States, and the Second Bank of the United States. Before those banks were created, you have what they call the Bank of America. But one thing we need to understand about these central banks and the medium of exchange that they were created for and used in lieu of what we call a currency was fiat money, paper currency, or what we call banknotes. Prior to that, the species that were used as a medium of exchange was gold and silver. All right, we're going to qualify that. But we're going to take you back to the history, starting with the origin of the bank monopolies and the medium of exchange that we were using under the bank monopoly, which was actually gold and silver. This is what the depositories were created for. So without further ado, put on your hard caps, listening caps, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to try to make it simple for you. I'm not going to be talking all the language you hear, dealing with those who dealing with trade secrets and the stock market and all that language is created confusion. It's simple than that. So I'm going to speak to you or tell you in what we call plain English. Like we talk now, this is how I'm going to explain it to you. So it will be easily understood. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to speak to you or tell you in what we call plain English. Okay, here we have United States Bullion Depository. The United States Bullion Depository. Anybody ever heard the word of the bullion? The word bullion is a term used for gold. It's a term used for gold. All right, let's research this history. United States Bullion Depository, often known as Fort Knox, is a fortified vault building located next to the United States Army post of Fort Knox, Kentucky. It's operated by the United States Department of Treasury. Now, the Department of Treasury is also controller of what we call the Federal Reserve. All right. The Federal Reserve and all the holdings under the Federal Reserve came under the jurisdiction of what we call the Department of Treasury under the National Banking Act of 1832, if I'm not mistaken, 1832 to 1834. We'll get into that in a second. But we need to understand what the purpose of this depository was for in regards to the medium of exchange that was used at the time of our ancestors. All right, it was gold and silver. But at the time of the Depression, or at the time of when what they call capital flight or illicit financial flow, when all the economic security and finances were taken from the national country. is happening all around the world. It's happening in Europe. It happened in uh, uh, the other continents on that continent called Europe, as well as here in North America, Canada, etc. And it all started with their central banking system, which was another system created from the original system dealing with the monetary sovereignty. Okay? But what was the purpose of the United States bullion depository? Let's find out. During World War II, the signed original Constitution of the United States Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, Lincoln's second inaugural address, and a draft of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address were stored in a vault for protection, as well as the Gettysburg Bible and an exemplified copy of the Magna Carta. So all this is sitting up there in Fort Knox Bullion Depository. Let's go into the history of it and why it was built. It says the first wave of gold shipments was made semi-weekly between January 11th and June 11th, 1937, and overseen by the United States Post Office Department. The gold was transported from the New York Assay Office and the Philadelphia Mint on 2 trains and 2 postal trucks by municipal police escorts. In armored train cars, postal workers were accompanied by soldiers, Secret Service agents, and mint guards. Decoy trains were employed. The gold was transferred from trains into army trucks under the protection of the soldier armies with armor-piercing bullets and machine guns. You hear that? Army-piercing bullets. Truck was escorted by combat cars of the 1st United States Cavalry Regiment to the depository. The Post Office Department billed the Treasury Department for transporting the weight of the crates and gold used in the 4th class postage rate, which addressed insurance fees. Right? Let's get into a little more history with this. Wider context, contemporary risk of gold reserves in the United States. The building and early operation of the depository occurred at the same time the total gold reserves of the United States experienced unprecedented growth. These reserves, which were 194 million troy ounces at the end of 1933, jumped to 503 million troy ounces by the end of 1939. Factors driving this growth included the gold price revaluation, dollar valuation in 1934, spurring a rise of global gold production, political uncertainties in Europe causing a capital flight to the United States, and rearmament the programs in Europe with increased United States net merchandise exports. By far, most of the increase, 277 million of troy ounces, were the result of gold imports from abroad. This consists of 174 million troy ounces out of the foreign mines of South Africa, 89 million troy ounces out of the foreign central banks reserved, mostly from France and United Kingdom. This is called the Bank of England, with the balance from other sources, which was the principally private holdings in India. Only 6 million troy ounces came from gold acquired in January 1934 under the gold buying program of the Executive Order of 6102 in 1933. All right, we'll touch on that in a second. That's where I want to get to. Where is it at? I'm overlooking it. So it's in 1933. Bear with me, bear with me. A lot to talk about, so I just want to find this. It's very important. What is it at? Yeah, let me just skip to it right quick. Let's see if I can find it. It's not there. All right, anyhow, all the gold that was taken from around the world is now stored in the United States Bullion Depository. And all the gold that was in that depository was a result of what we call Executive Order 6102, as well as the Emergency Banking Act, which all the gold, all those who were holding gold had to return in their gold, and those who failed to do so were being under heavy penalties. Heavy penalties. All right. So this is also called crown gold. The history on crown gold. Crown gold. Crown gold is a 24 karat gold alloy used in crown coins introduced into England in 1526 by Henry VIII. And this alloy, this production of gold is 22 part out of 24, and is appreciably less prone to wear than the soft 22 karat gold of earlier gold sovereigns. And important to point for coins intended for everyday use and circulation. All right. Circulation of these coins. In the United States, until 1834, gold circulating coins were minted in 24 karat gold, although using about silver as well as copper. From 1834, the finances of the United States coin gold was decreased from that 22 karat gold coin standard to 0.89925 fine, and in 1837 to 0.9005. This 90% gold copper alloy continued in the United States from 1837 until the gold coins were removed from circulation in the United States in 1933. 1933. Okay, so these gold coins or crown gold are called sovereign currency. Sovereign was a gold coin of the Kingdom of England, first issued in 1489 under the King Henry VIII, while the coin typically had a nominal value of £1 sterling or 1 shilling. This goes back to the early history of what we call American currency. So we understand that all the gold sitting in the bullion depository, which we call Fort Knox, was a result of all the gold taken from around the world as a result of what we call capital flight and illicit financial flow of all the economic currency that was used as a medium of exchange. All right, used as a medium of exchange as part of a barter system. This is what trade is all about. All right, but it says that this gold was suspended in 1932 as a result of what we call the Executive Order 6102, as well as the Emergency Banking Act. All right, let's get into this. Early American coins. Early American currency. Now, it mentions shillings. It says because few coins were minted in the 13 colonies. When you say 13 colonies, you're talking about the 13, when you talk about the 13 colonies, you're talking about the United States. Because the United States or the United Colonies called the 13 colonies. And the only way they came about is by way of breaking away from Great Britain, which is at this time under control of what they call British Parliament. All right. America was officially recognized as a sovereign nation to the ratification of what we call the Treaty of Paris of 1783. Ratification date was January 14, 1784. And they really didn't get their independence until their constitution was created, which is in 1789. All right. But I said because few coins were minted in the 13 colonies, which later became the United Colonies and then the United States, which was only 13, foreign coins like the Spanish dollar were widely circulated. Colonial governments at times issued paper money to facilitate economic activities. The British Parliament passed currency acts known as the Currency Act of 1751, 1764, and 1733 to regulate the colonial paper money, which was contrary to the currency that we used at that time at the medium of exchange, which was called gold and silver. Now, they did allow paper currency to come into fruition, but it was supposed to be redeemable for gold and silver. But this was somehow distorted. I'm going to show you why. It says, during the American Revolution, the colonials became independent states, no longer subject to monetary regulations arbitrarily imposed on them by the British Parliament. Even though the British Parliament was under the authority of the Crown. Because the Crown, everything belonged to the Crown, was called Crown land. And we know all the commodities such as gold and silver comes from the land, which belongs to the Crown. All right, everybody needs to understand that. All right, so let's get into how we get into this creation of what we call paper currency and the purpose of paper currency. All right. This is what we call private banking, shadow banking, or another term for it's called wildcat banking. Wildcat banking. Wildcat banking was the issue of paper currency. This came under the Legal Tender Act of 1862. 1862, from 1836 to 1865, this was after the National Banking Act was instituted. All right, this is called the free banking era, when there was no infrastructure created in regards to the checking in of balances in lieu of the medium of exchange that was supposed to be backed by under the redemption of gold and silver. All right, let's get into how this became a problem. It says that in the free banking era from 1836 to 1865, when the country had no national banking system, states granted banking charges readily and applied regulations ineffectively or if at all. This is called banking monopolies. Banking monopolies. I'm not making that word up. It's a true word because a monopoly is a corporation, and the corporation is that was given a license, permission by a charter. All right, bank closures and outright scams regularly occur, leaving people with worthless money, which is the subject to today. How do I know that? Operations in remote locations, you can go every corner, every block, you see a bank operating there. And that's not talking about just central banks. It's not talking about your central bank. It's not talking about your, what's the other one? Commercial bank, which is the majority of the ones we deal with. And then you got the other ones that are called non-banks, which is what you call like a check agency, check cashing, places like that. All these deal with the issuing of what they call bank notes, or bank notes are called promissory notes. So it just said under the wildcat banking that wildcat banking was the issue of paper currency in the United States by poorly capitalized state chartered banks. Operating in remote locations with limited and absent financial infrastructure, wildcat bankers applied the medium of exchange. The promissory note was used as a medium of exchange, and the person in possession of that medium of exchange, i.e. the promissory note, had in their possession what they call a bearer note that they issue on their own credit, i.e. called trade credit. These notes or bearer notes or promissory notes or greenbacks or bank notes were redeemable for gold and silver coins. But now they went away from it being redeemable and now collateralized it to what they call government bonds or real estate notes. And real estate notes denotes to security interest as a result of the security. Security is property put up as a result of a gift, something that's given or a pledge. We get to that in a second. So it says, these notes were formally redeemable for a species of gold and silver coins, but typically collateralized by other assets such as government bonds or real estate notes, or occasionally by nothing at all. Very, 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 very important. What is a bearer instrument? What is a bearer note or bearer certificate? Let's see. A bearer instrument is a document that entitles the holder of the document to the rights of the ownership of a title to the underlying property. Now we know one thing that's considered property is the so-called gold that's set up there in Fort Knox. But now that gold has been taken out of circulation, so it's in the possession of somebody. All right, now you've been issued out what they call bearer notes or bearer bonds or bearer instruments that shows the entity that had in possession that bearer instrument or that bearer note or that bearer bond, the ability to be able to receive consideration for it. All right. It says the bearer instrument is a document that entitles the holder of the document to the right of ownership of title to the underlying property. All right, let's get back out of here. And it also says that they issue it on their own credit. These notes were formerly redeemable in pieces of gold and silver coin, particularly collateralized by other assets such as government bonds or real estate note. What is a real estate note? A real estate note in the United States is called a real estate lien, borrower's note, or which is also a promissory note secured by a specific mortgage loan. I'm pretty sure all y'all can understand what that means, because I'm pretty sure all y'all have a mortgage loan. All right. And a mortgage loan is nothing more than a bearer instrument showing the security interest in lieu of the property that you now possess. Don't own, but you possess it, right? Until that pledge or that obligation based off the contract is fulfilled. It says the mortgage notes are written promises to repay a specific sum of money plus interest at the specific rate and length of the time to fulfill that promise. We know promissory notes have a maturity date, i.e. 90 days. While the mortgagee or contract itself hypothecates or imposes a lien on the title of a property as a security for a loan, i.e. security interest. The mortgage note states that the amount of debt and the rate of interest and obligates to the borrower who signs the note personally for the repayment. In foreclosure procedures in certain jurisdictions, borrower may require the foreclosing party to produce the note as evidence that they are the true owners of the debt. So what happens when you buy a property, you have a broker. The broker is the lender, right? He's the lender. He sets you up with the institution that lends you, which creates a security interest that now you're obligated to pay back. So the property is it's under security interest of a third party. Let's look at these terms. Security interest. Security interest. Cornell Law School. So these legal terms we're using and we're talking about is a term to be used in law. We're not talking abstract, we're talking concrete because law is concrete. So security interest is an interest in someone else's property. I repeat, a security interest is an interest in someone else's property created by a contract or by law. A mortgage is a type of security interest created by a contract, i.e. we just said a mortgage loan, a mortgage deed, or a real estate lien. That's a security interest, and the lender has a security in the property that they don't own. And if you don't pay, if you don't fulfill your obligation based off your pledge, then it can be garnished. All right. What is security? Security, property that is given on a pledge to guarantee the performance of an obligation. 2, an instrument that functions as proof of a security interest in a public or private body, i.e. share a bond. These are called bond certificates, bond instruments, i.e. bearer notes that are used as a medium of exchange with those who have it in their possession, such as what we call a promissory note or negotiable instrument, because the negotiable instrument is called a bearer's note. Let's look at that. Let's go back to that. Bearer note. No, what's the thing on that? Okay, here we go. Bearer instruments or bearer notes or bearer certificates. It says, listen very close, everybody. In the United States, under the Uniform Commercial Code, a negotiable instrument such as a check or a promissory note, i.e. paper currency, that is payable to the order of the bearer, i.e. bearer of the instrument, the one who holds the instrument and the possession to the property, may be enforced, redeemed for payment by the party in possession. You're not able to redeem the gold and silver in lieu of the promissory note that they issue in regards to the collateral that they issue on that promissory note that you're now in possession of. That gives them security in the interest based off the contract that you pledge to do. Because what does pledge mean? Pledge. A promise. A type of security interest in which the lender takes possession of personal property as security for an obligation. The personal property involved is also called a pledge. Initially, the lender's possessory interest is subject to the rules of bailment or other types of deposit. If the borrower fails to perform as agreed, the lender may sell the personal property and keep the proceeds. So security interest that somebody has in lieu of the contract created by way of you pledging to that contract that was created by you to be a receiver of that bearer instrument, i.e. that promissory note. And that promissory note says that you got to pay back something. If you don't, guess what? That property is taken from you. I hope that makes sense. Let's go back to the early origin of American currency. Because few coins were minted in the 13 colonies, which later became the United States colonies, and then the United States, foreign coins like the Spanish dollar were widely circulated, and the colonial government at times issued paper money to facilitate economic activities. The British Parliament passed Currency Acts of 1751, 1764, and 1773, as well as Article 1, Section 10, the contract clause, clearly stipulates that the only thing to be used as the medium of exchange for paying of debts is gold and silver. Gold and silver. So that means that all that gold and silver that we use to be paying debt is sitting right up there in the Fort Knox Depository. As a result of that, what we call Emergency Banking Act of 1933 and the Executive Order 6102. Let's get into that. But before I show you that, we just said that wildcat banking was the result of the medium of exchange to the bearer of the note in lieu of the medium of exchange. Wildcat banking is the creation of paper currency, which is used as a medium of exchange. And used as a medium of exchange in the form of a bearer note, i.e., a bearer certificate or bearer shares, and they are issued on their own credit. These notes were supposed to be redeemable for gold and silver, but now they denote what they call government bonds or real estate notes. You know, a real estate note is a promissory note. All right, a real estate note is a promissory note. Now check this out. The first bank in America was called the Bank of America. And all the other banks that are created are nothing more than monopolies. All right. It says right here, New York Times. The Justice Department is poised to announce a $16.65 billion settlement with the Bank of America over accusation that is duped investors into buying troubled mortgage securities, said People's Brief on the matter, the single largest government settlement by the company in America's history. Let's go back to wildcat banking. Real estate notes. A real estate note is the United States a mortgage note or real estate lien, which is a promissory note secured by a specific mortgage loan. So we're going back to Bank of America, and they just got sued for $16 billion for unsecured mortgage loans. Unsecured mortgage loans. Let's go. It says, even after court nears completion, prosecutors are preparing for a separate civil case against Angelo Mazzillo, the man who came to embody the risk taken for which Bank of America is now paying duly, a rare move against a senior executive at the center of the financial crisis. The Bank of America settlement will be coded to a painful period for the bank and the broader financial industry. More than any other Wall Street giant, Bank of America was the source of the troubled subprime loans that helped ignite this crisis. The result of its acquisition of Merrill Lynch and Mr. Mazzillo's countrywide financial, the size and scope of the expected settlement, which will be announced at news conference at 9 a.m. on Thursday, reflects the extent of the damages. The deal will resolve more than 24 investigations from prosecutors across the country. The people briefed on the matter said, including Manhattan, Brooklyn, Los Angeles, New Jersey, and North Carolina, to settle the various investigations, some of which have not been previously reported. The bank is expected to pay more than $9.6 billion cash gas penalty, and $7 billion in so-called soft dollar payments to aid struggling consumers. Now, I'm gonna tell you why this is being done, because they don't want to deal with the origin of what we call monetary sovereignty, the ability to be able to create lawful money. And we know the only lawful money is what? Gold and silver. So let's get into this. Monetary sovereignty. Monetary sovereignty is the power of the state to exercise exclusive legal control over currency, broadly defined by exercise of the following powers: to be able to create legal tender. Legal tender was the promissory notes that were created as the medium of exchange and what we call bearer notes. And those bearer notes created a security interest based off the pledge. All right, let's get another source. Where is it at? Right here. This is from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Right here, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, from the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Money and payments, the US dollar in the age of digital transformation. This is called sovereign digital money, or CB, what's the term here? CBDC, central bank and digital currency, all right? There's a difference. Let's just get a scope of what I'm talking about. So once again, this is money, payments in the US dollar in the age of digital transformation. The existing forms of money. Everybody knows that when you have paper currency in your pocket, or if you have a check in your pocket, which are all negotiable instruments, and you might have some coins, but none of those coins are gold. You know, the Federal Reserve has the power to create money. They have the ability to mint and what they call it. We'll discuss in a second. But the Federal Reserve has the ability to mint and coin money. It says money serves as a means of payment, a store of value, and a unit of account in the United States. Money takes multiple forms. One, central bank money is a liability of the central bank, i.e. security interest. In the United States, central banking money comes in the form of what we call physical currency issued by the Federal Reserve and digital balances held by commercial banks at the Federal Reserve on that level. So when you carry money in your pocket and you take it to a store to do a type of transaction, what happens? When that money is deposited to that depository, what happens? It comes up on the digital screen. In any type of financial system, it always has a digital balance book. All right? Commercial bank money is the digital form of money that is most commonly used by the public. Commercial bank money is held in accounts at commercial banks. Then you have non-bank money, which is the digital money held as balance at non-bank financial service providers. These firms typically conduct balance transfers on their own books using a ratio and technology, including mobile apps. This is coming from the Governors Board of the Federal Reserve, all right, on what is money. And money is what they call digital money or sovereign money, which is called CB, it's called security banking digital currency. Central banking digital currency, also called digital fiat currency or digital base money, is a digital currency issued by a central bank rather than by a commercial bank. It is also a liability of the central bank and denominated in the sovereign currency, as is the case with the physical banknotes and coins. So we know that sovereign currency goes back to crown currency. Crown currency is called crown gold. We just went through that. Pull it back up. Crown gold. Crown gold was removed from circulation in 1933 with the Emergency Banking Act, all right? Crown gold is called bullion gold, which is sitting right now in Fort Knox. Now, why was this gold taken out of circulation? You have to understand the banking system that was created under what they call banking monopoly. What is a monopoly, first of all? Let's get into that. state monopoly. In economics, a government monopoly or public monopoly or private monopoly is a form of coercive monopoly, i.e., one that's done by force or under color of law, de facto, whatever term you choose to use. It's a monopoly in which a government agency or government corporation is the sole provider of the particular goods or services in competition, and which is prohibited by competition is prohibited by law. It is a monopoly created, owned, and operated by the government. It is usually distinguished from a government granted monopoly, where the government grants a monopoly to a private individual or company. A government monopoly may be run by any level of government, national, regional, local, for levels below the national, or is a local monopoly. The term state monopoly usually means a government monopoly run by a national government. A monopoly is nothing more than a corporation. Coercive monopoly. In the economics and business ethics, a coercive monopoly is a firm that is able to raise prices and make production decisions without the risk that competition will arise to draw away their customers. This is governed by antitrust law or anti-monopoly laws. All right. A coercive monopoly is not merely a sole supply of a particular kind of good or service. A monopoly. It is a monopoly where there is no opportunity to compete with it because entry into the field is legally closed. All right. So that means that they're the ones who supply and demand. All right, so that means that you have to go into the origin of those who create a monopoly, and most monopolies that are private are granted a license to become a monopoly by a government granted monopoly, because we know that the government is the monopoly itself, and monopoly is nothing more than a corporation through its license of incorporation. I hope everybody understands that. You don't understand what I'm talking about? Let's go into it. Sovereign monopoly. Protecting the sovereign's monopoly money. Once again, protecting the sovereign's monopoly money. When you mention the word sovereign, you all automatically talking about a monarch, because the monarch is sovereign. A lot of people wear the term sovereign, that don't mean they're sovereign. The United States is not sovereign. The only way they became sovereign is by, as I said, the Treaty of Paris of 1783. And that was even recognized to the ratification date, which was January 14th, 1784, which is my birthday, by what they call the British Parliament. Let's just go into this in a second. When they said the United States became a sovereign state, the only thing they're saying is that the United States became a sovereign monopoly because they got their charter from the British, by the British Crown under King George III. That's where they got their license from. All right. Sovereign states have had a monopoly over the production of circulation currency for well over a century. Governments, not private entities, issue circulating currency. Indeed, circulating currency. We'll move further. Why did sovereign money monopolies come into existence in the 19th and 20th century? Question mark. Should circulating private money coexist once again with the sovereign money in the 21st century? Question mark. This essay explores the fundamental questions of legal and financial architecture by revisiting the original legislative debates that led to the sovereign money monopoly in England, the United States, Canada, and Sweden. In every case, privately issued money first circulated because of the limited monopoly supply, i.e. competition, antitrust law, anti-competition. A shortage of species, metallic coins, i.e. alloy, and then were ultimately banned to improve financial stability, gain greater control over monetary policy, or strengthen the sovereign's physical position. All right. Today, lawmakers and regulators assume a law presumption that coexists between private issued digital money and sovereign digital money. Once again, today lawmakers and regulators assume that coexistence between private issued digital money and sovereign digital money is the optimal path forward in our crafting legal guardrails under that assumption. And it's a very strong assumption, one that should be challenged since the upside is unclear and the costs remain similar. We argue that if anything, the sovereign monopoly of circulating currency should be protected. Queen, could you warm this up for me? should be protected. So we know that the currency under the sovereign monopolies and the currency that was issued by the sovereign monopolies, i.e. their banks, it should be protected. And we know under the Currency Act of 1751, 1764, 1772 and 73, as well as the contract clause, Article 1, Section 10, says that the same thing they're saying here, that the sovereign monopoly and must be protected. All right. It says, during the 19th and 20th century, every country decided that the production of circulating money would be the monopoly given to the sovereign, particularly to the country central bank. We know United States had Bank of America, first and second United States banks, and then they had the free banking era, which we call wild banking, which still exists today. Unbacked securities, all right? Because you don't redeem them for gold and silver. Gold and silver is a sovereign's gold sitting up there in Fort Knox under bullion. We know bullion means gold. All right. We know that the Bank of America was pre-existed by the Bank of England, which was established in 1694. So here's the breakdown in lieu of the sovereign monopoly banks from each country: Austria, Norway, Denmark, United Kingdom. As you can see, 1694, that's the Bank of England. The United States, 1913. They didn't talk about the Bank of America. They didn't put up the first Bank of the United States or the second Bank of the United States. They said the Federal Reserve, because they know that the banks back in the under the Continental Congress was supposed to be using gold and silver. But as you can see here, it's the United States in 1913, that belongs to the Federal Reserve Act, right? Okay, we're gonna leave here. Let's go to what is that? Monetary policy in the United States. Very important. The monetary policy of the United States is a set of policies relating to minting and printing of the United States dollar. Paper currency, banknotes, greenback, whatever you call them, is the medium of exchange that's used and denotes what they call a bearer instrument or a bearer's notes to the one who has it in possession and it's supposed to be redeemable upon demand. Because it said the United States policy in regards to creating money, i.e. dollar bills, plus the legal exchange of that dollar bill in lieu of what we call currency based off demand deposits, the money supply, etc. In the United States, the central bank or the Federal Reserve System, colloquially known as the Fed, has the monetary authority. It's also significant to point out that the United States used fiat currency as of 1933, whereas from 1873 and 1933, the precious metal standard or gold standard was in use at that particular time. Bear with me for a second. So as we can see, it said it's significant to point out that the United States used a fiat currency as of the 1933, i.e. the Gold Reserve Act. Whereas from 1873 to 1933, a precious metal standard or gold standard was in use, i.e. the sovereign gold, i.e. crown gold, i.e. bullion gold that's sitting right up there in Fort Knox. Everybody better follow. Okay, so let's get into the history of the Federal Reserve System and why it was created. The Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve Act was passed by the 630 United States Congress and signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson on December 23rd, 1913. Okay. All right. So as I said, the Federal Reserve was passed by Woodrow Wilson in 1913 AD. All right. The law created the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system of the United States. And as I said, the monetary policy of the United States was the ability to create paper currency, not meant gold or silver, but meant commercial paper. Loan title, an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal Reserve banks to furnish an elastic currency to afford means of rediscounting commercial paper to establish a more effective supervision of the banking of the United States and for other purposes. Go back to wildcat banking. Wildcat banking was the issues of paper currency in the United States by poorly capitalized state chartered banks. This wildcat banking was alongside more stable. Wildcat banking is just alongside more stable state banks during the free banking era. Operating in remote locations with limited access to financial infrastructure, wildcat banks supply a medium of exchange in the form of bearer notes that they issue on their own credit. These notes supposed to be redeemable with gold and silver, but typically collateralized for what they call real estate notes or government bonds. The government bonds are security interests for a pledge of a debt that you have yet to pay back. All right. So let's go back to the Federal Reserve. And we know that the Federal Reserve Act was created to create paper currency, but we know gold was still out there somewhere. Gold didn't get called upon until what we call the Trading with the Enemy Act, which brings us here. Of 1970. The Trading with the Enemy Act is governed under the United States Code, Title 12 National Code, Section 19.5, dealing with bank holiday, and Section 50 of the United States Code, Section 4301. It is a United States federal law enacted on October 6, 1917, that gives the President of the United States the power to observe or restrict any and all trade between the United States and enemies at that time of war. The Trading with the Enemy Act was amended in 1933 by the Emergency Banking Act to extend to the President's authority also in peacetime. It was amended again in 1977 by the International Emergency Economic Power Act. Okay, so what is the Emergency Banking Act? Let's go ahead. The Emergency Banking Act, or officially the title was the Emergency Banking Act of March 9, 1933, was an act passed by the United States Congress on March 1933 in the attempt to stabilize the banking system. All right? In the attempt to stabilize the banking system. This goes back into the bank holiday. All right. This can be summed up by what we call Executive Order 6102. Let's look at that. Because we're going to get into the sovereign goal. So Executive Order 6102 explains that. Executive Order 6102 is an executive order. It's not a legislative order, y'all. It's an executive order signed on April 5th, 1933 by the United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt, forbidding the hoarding of gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates within the continental United States. The executive order was made under the authority of the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. This was when we were at war with Germany. as amended by the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. So the Trading with the Enemy Act was amended by the Emergency Banking Act of 1933, which also denotes what we call the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Anybody heard of that? Let's see if we can pull that up. Let me just pull it up right there. Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Gold Reserve Act. United States Gold Reserve Act of January 30th, 1934 required that all gold and gold certificates held by the Federal Reserve be surrendered, invested in the sole title of the United States Department of Treasury. This is why all the gold is sitting up in Fort Knox in what they call the bullion depository, because it was surrendered to the Department of Treasury from the Federal Reserve through their Executive Order 6102, which goes back to here. Executive Order 6102 is an executive order signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt forbidding the holding of gold coins, gold bullion, or gold certificates within the continent of the United States. The executive order was made under the authority of the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, as amended by the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. All right. The limitations on the gold ownership in the United States was repealed after President Gerald Ford signed a bill legalizing private ownership of gold coins, bars, certificates by an act of Congress codified by Public Law 93373, which went into effect in December 34, 1974. All right. Now, there's still a lot of gold out there in circulation, but we need to question ourselves, is that really gold? Is it really gold that these people have in these shops? Because if there was an Emergency Banking Act of 1934, as well as Executive Order 6104, then why is this gold still circulating or being used for trade and commerce purposes? And who gold is it? This needs to be understood. All right. So let's get down to it. Let's go back and we have. Okay. So we know paper currency that was created as a result of wildcat banking put us in a position where we became obligated as securities. And security that we became obligated to is based off the contract that we were created with the currency created by the United States, which was created unlawfully. It was created unlawfully because there were already laws in place, such as the Currency Act of 1751, 1764, and 1777, 1773, in regards to the maintaining the sovereign monopolies. And we know a monopoly, in order for you to have a monopoly, you must have a license. And monopolies on a license is called letter pads. Right? Let's go back here and then close it. The forestall system. Competitive law. Let me go here right quick. Competitive laws. Come back here. Competitive laws in the field of law that promotes or seeks to maintain market competition by regulating anti-competitive conduct by companies, i.e. monopolies. Competition law is implemented through public and private enforcement. It's also known as antitrust law, or just antitrust, anti-monopolies, or trade practices. They are governed under what they call trust law. Everybody, I hope they know what trust law is. All right, let's go back to the origin of the history pertaining to antitrust law or anti-monopoly. Middle Ages. Legislation in England to control monopolies and restricted practices was enforced well before the Norman Conquest. Let's go ahead. Statute of Monopolies, 1632. I know there's something I'm missing. Let me come here first. Statute of Monopolies. The Statute of Monopolies, 1633, by King James I, was an act of the Parliament of England. It didn't say British, it didn't say United States, it said the Statute of Monopolies. It goes back to East Indian Company when they were dealing with a merchant or trade or commerce in regards to property, which denotes to chattel property, because slaves at one time were called property. So how could you have money when you were the property and as you were considered a commodity? Just like gold and silver was a commodity, you were a commodity as well. So just as they had it on being traded, you were being traded as well. So it says here, Statute of Monopoly was an act of Parliament of England, notably as the first statutory expression of an English patent law. Patent evolved from letter patent. What is a letter patent? Letter patent, always in the plural, are a type of legal instrument in the form of a published written order issued by a monarch, president, or other heads of state, generally granting an office, right, monopoly, title, status to a person or corporation. We know in the United States, they are called state monopolies, which are coercive, because they're coercive, they're coercing the authority that came from the original monopoly, which was the sovereign monopoly that was issued by a letter patent given from the monarch. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. Patents involve letter patent issued by the monarch to grant monopolies over particular industries to skilled individuals with new techniques. Originally intended to strengthen England's economy by making it self-sufficient and promoting new industries, the system gradually became seen as a way to raise money through charging patent holders without having to incur the public impopularity of a tax. Elizabeth I particularly used the system instinctively, issuing patents for common commodities such as starch and salt. Unrest eventually persuaded her to turn to the administration of the patent over to the common law courts, but her successor, James I, used it even more. Despite a committee established to investigate grievances in excess, Parliament made several efforts to further curtail the monarch's power. This resulted with the Statute of Monopoly passed on 29th May 1624. The statute repealed some past and future patents and monopolies, but preserved exceptions. One of these were for patents for novel inventions, blah, 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 blah. So we know the first statutes of monopolies were created was by the monarch, King James I in 1623. That's going back to competitive laws. Yeah. In closing. Okay, state monopoly. Competitive laws or anti-monopoly law or antitrust law, meaning one and the same. The origin, as we known, as just said, the first statute of monopoly issued by King James I, and these monopolies that were created were only for commerce. They weren't true de jure monarchs, they were de facto monarchs. All right, it said the legislation in England to control monopolies and restricted practice was enforced well before the Norman Conquest. And we know the Norman Conquest goes back to feudalism, which is still being practiced today. The Doomsday recorded that forced sale or forestalling the practice of buying up goods before they reach market and then inflating the price was one of the three fortresses that King Edward the Confessor could carry out through England. King Edward the Confessor was the son of Ethelred the Unready, the son of King Edward the Peaceful, which is our Jesus Christ. All right. When England was overthrown by the Norman conquest and instituted feudalism, which is practiced today, because this is England, because we know the authority under the monarch here on the crown land was under what we call the British crown, which was a uniting of all the crowns, Great Britain, England, and Ireland. I mean, England, Ireland, and Scotland. All right, so we know that the origin of monopolies goes back to what we call, or record as what they call forestalling, or what they call forestalling, which goes back to the forestalling system that was created here in North America, which brings me here. First, let's go back and see what forestalling is. What is forestalling or forestilling? Engrossing law. Engrossing, forestalling, and regrading were marketing offenses in English, Welsh, and Irish common law. The term were used to describe unacceptable methods of influencing the market, sometimes by creating a local monopoly for a certain good, usually food. The term was often used together and with overlapping meanings. They became obsolete in 1844. Blackstone commentary described this offense against the public trade. He stated, forestalling, the buying or contracting for any merchandise or victual coming in the way of the market, or dissuading persons from bringing their goods or provisions there, or persuading them to enhance the price when there, and any of which practice make the market dearer to the fair trader. Regrading the buying of corn or other dead victual in any market and selling it again at the same market or within 4 miles of the place. But this also enhances the price of the provisions, as every successive seller must have a successive profit. And engrossing, the getting into one possession or buying up large quantities of corn or other dead victuals with an intent to sell them again. This must of course be injurious to the public by putting it in the power of one or two rich men to raise the price provisions of their own discretion. It's called inflation and deflation, which results in what we call recessions, which results in what we call the Depression, which is called the Great Depression, which was the reason why we went into the Great Revolutionary War. Because of the recession and depression that they went in when they got away from the gold standard. All right, which is called the forestalling system, which was instituted by Edmund Forestalling. And I'll give you this in closing. The forestalling system was a banking system developed by Edmund J. Forestall in 1842, and is used until the end of the Civil War. After the Panic of 1837, banks underwent two main reformations. New York adopted a free banking system, while Louisiana set up a banking system with specie reserve requirement. The Forestall system propelled Louisiana to economic maturity with its sound and credible banking system. It has been called one of the building blocks of the modern financial system still in practice today, i.e. a hybrid system. All right, it came to the second bank of the United States, which started what they call the new banking era, which is now what we call wild banking. And let's just go through that in closing. Wild banking was the issue of paper currency in the United States by poorly capitalized state chartered banks. This wildcat banking existed alongside more stable state banks during what they call the free banking era. And the free banking era history of central banking in America. Bank of North America. Some founding fathers were strongly opposed to the formation of a national bank system. The fact that England tried to place the colonies under the monetary control of the Bank of England was seen by many as the last straw of oppression, which led directly to American Revolutionary War. So as you can see, The Bank of England in 1694 tried to put the colonies under control of the Bank of England, which caused the reason why they broke away from the Bank of England. They started their own bank called the Bank of America. And as you can see, Bank of America just got sued for $16 billion as a result of that. So as I say in closing, you better understand where your money comes from for that money depreciate. And with that, I'll say peace.